More. Let's go to Havana now and talk to Ed Augustin, who's standing by to talk to us. Ed, first of all, what kind of legacy does Raul Castro and his brother leave Cuba?
Well, Raul Castro took over the presidency formally from his then very ill brother, Fidel Castro, in 2008. And he was president for 10 years. And his main legacy as president was to try to make the moribund, stagnant, bloated Cuban economy sustainable long after the Soviet Union fell. Productivity is incredibly low in Cuba. Wages are miserable. State enterprises are in a terrible shape. Cuba used to produce more sugar than any country in the world, and now even has to import some because production is so inefficient. So he's moved Cuba on a road away from a state socialism economy to a market socialism economy. That's his main legacy as president. It ought to be said as well that another big part of his legacy is making Cuba sovereign, quite frankly. Prior to 1959, Cuba was effectively run by the United States. The mafia and the US ambassador in the 50s even said that he was often the most powerful person in the country. Cuba is the only country in the Caribbean to have won its sovereignty and has been a bulwark against US attempts to overthrow that country for kicking out US interests for over 60 years. It came out just 2 days ago that the CIA in the 1960s tried and failed to assassinate Raul Castro, Fidel Castro. They tried to assassinate him many times. And the Congress itself has been timed to coincide with the 60th anniversary of the botched, failed Bay of Pigs invasion of Cuba, which is the only time in Latin American history where a US-organized invasion has failed, has been beaten back by a Latin American army, the only time. And so I think a large part of Raul Castro's legacy as Minister of Defense for decades before becoming president is simply to have resisted and maintained sovereignty in the most extraordinarily difficult of situations. And of course, Cubans pay the price because that's why this country is sanctioned to this day.
Yeah, and clearly then there are huge challenges ahead for the new leader, Diaz-Canel. Talk to us a bit about what you think those biggest challenges are.
I think the biggest challenge is the economy. Cuba, the Cuban economy, Cuba's been in an economic crisis, an economic and social crisis for 30 years. It's an extraordinarily long time. And right now it's going through its severest economic crisis since the 1990s, since the fall of the Soviet Union. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, the Trump administration lashed Cuba with over 200 new sanctions and stopped petrol coming into the country, closed down remittances, stopped Cuba being able to make payments or receive payments in the international financial system that is largely responsive to the US. And the other one, of course, is the pandemic. Cuba, like most Caribbean countries, is highly dependent on tourism, and that they didn't have a bad year last year. It just disappeared. So the economy is absolutely front and center of everyone's mind in Cuba, including the government's. And tied to that is coming up with the goods. I mean, you have a couple of generations here, people my age and younger, who've grown up in a context of privation and depredation and huge queues, and being able to connect with those people and promise them a future that they can believe in on the island, a future where they can imagine having children, a future where they can imagine earning some money, is key to the long-term sustainability of this political project. So huge challenges for the new president.
Really interesting stuff. Thank you very much for talking to us. That is Ed Augustin for us there.